The night was heavy with rain, and the road ahead glistened like a long snake winding through the darkness, reflecting the sparse, flickering streetlights that danced like spirits on the wet tarmac. Inside the car, Amara sat with her heart brimming with dreams and pride. She was barely discharged from the hospital, her body tender, stitched, and swollen, yet she had never felt more alive in her life. Her thoughts flew to the life she imagined waiting for her, the rich men, the famous men, and all the money they had. In her mind, every curve on her body was a magnet. Every step she took a summons to destiny. But fate has a cunning way of turning the proud heart upside down. The tires of the car hit a patch of water. The vehicle shuddered, skidding sideways like a wild horse refusing its reins. In an instant, Amara felt herself lifted, tossed from one end of the car to the other, flung as if invisible hands were tossing her about, careless of the fragile vessel they played with. Metal screamed as the car's frame bent. Glass exploded in 1,000 glinting shards, cutting through the air like falling stars, sharp and cruel. The acrid smell of burnt rubber and wet earth filled her nostrils, stinging her lungs, making her gasp. The world tilted violently, and the familiar hum of tires against asphalt became a roar of chaos, thunderous and unforgiving. Her body slammed against the door, then the seat, then the roof, each collision sending waves of agony through her chest, back, and limbs. Her head cracked against the window, and she tasted iron on her tongue, sharp and warm. Her mind, however, could not focus on pain. It went straight to the most precious thing she owned. Her body, her new bum-bum, the very reason she had risked everything. Trembling, she lifted her hand backward, fingers shaking like leaves in a storm. She did not touch her face, nor her legs, nor her hands. She reached for the curve of her newly enhanced form, desperate to know if what she had sacrificed everything for was still whole. The warmth beneath her fingers was wrong, alien, and it sent a shiver down her spine. Her mind screamed, "My BBL, my future," but the answer came in heat and pain, not the smooth perfection she had imagined. Her body, the symbol of all she had hoped for, had betrayed her, twisted and damaged in a heartbeat. Her vision blurred. Every breath she drew was shallow, tasting of blood and wet earth. Every movement sent jolts of agony through her swollen body. Yet even as the darkness pressed down, she refused to let go completely. She clutched at the last connection to her dream, her hand brushing against what was left of her curves, a trembling act of hope and desperation. Then the world shifted again. She felt her body being lifted, carried, guided by hands she could not see. Cold, hard floors replaced the wet asphalt. The sound of hurried voices rose around her. Bright, sterile lights stabbed at her eyes. Pain came in waves, relentless and merciless. The warmth she felt in her body, once a source of pride, now burned like fire, spreading through her chest and hips. She wanted to scream, to cry, to curse the night, but her voice would not come. Her eyes fluttered, weighted by exhaustion, fear, and disbelief. And as her consciousness ebbed and her eyes finally closed, she understood the terrible truth. In a flash of a moment, the world had taken everything she had fought for, borrowed for, and dreamed of. The car, the rain, the slick road, all had conspired to turn her hope into ruin. All the sacrifices she had made, all the money borrowed, all the pride, it now lay in pieces, tangled like the wreckage that had once carried her dreams. Before the cruel hand of fate struck, before the rain-slicked road stole her dreams, Amara's life had seemed ordinary to anyone looking from the outside. She was the daughter of a humble man, a farmer who had tilled the soil with calloused hands and sun-browned skin, who had loved the land more than riches and taught her that sweat was the truest wealth a person could own. When he passed, leaving her a single small property, nothing grand, nothing luxurious, she had inherited not just land, but the weight of her father's quiet pride. The house was small, built from clay bricks and timber, with a roof that leaked when the rains came, and a yard where wild flowers grew in joyful disarray. It was not much, but it had been her father's heart, and she had loved him for it, even if she did not understand the value then. But Amara was not content. Her heart, like the restless river that cut through her village, could never stay still. She looked around at the men who came to court her, the humble traders, the farmers, the young men whose eyes carried sincerity, and she found no pleasure in them. "I want more," she would whisper to herself, often in secret, though sometimes her words escaped her lips in laughter, cruel and sharp. She wanted the kind of life she saw on television: bright lights, expensive clothes, music blaring from speakers, and men whose names made people gasp. Ordinary men, no matter how good, were invisible to her eyes. The people began to murmur. They said she had a proud spirit, that she laughed too loudly, that she dismissed anyone who did not sparkle with fame or wealth. When a young man of good character approached her with a proposal, she would scoff. "Why come to me with your money from the market or the farm?" she would say, tossing her head. "I want a man the whole city talks about, a man whose face is on screens, whose name is on lips everywhere." And the men she insulted left quietly, their hearts heavy, while the elders shook their heads, muttering warnings she refused to hear. At night, she would sit by the small window of her father's old house, watching the lights from passing cars in the city beyond, imagining the life of glamour and fame she would one day possess. She would scroll endlessly on her phone, watching videos of women dressed in designer clothes, their laughter echoing in rooms she could only dream of entering. She studied their curves, their smiles, the way men bowed before them in admiration, and she swore to herself that she would one day look like them, that she would be envied, desired, untouchable. Her friends, a few who shared her vanity, encouraged her. "You have beauty, Amara," they said, "but you must shape it. You must make men chase you, make them fall at your feet. The world belongs to those bold enough to take it." And bold she became. Pride and obsession twined around her like twin snakes. She began to save secretly, to plan, to borrow, until her modest inheritance seemed nothing more than a stepping stone toward the life she envisioned. When whispers of a skilled surgeon reached her, one who could reshape the body, enhance curves, and give her what she believed was the ultimate power, she felt her heart leap. It was no longer enough to be pretty. She must be perfect, irresistible, the kind of woman who commanded the attention of kings and men of wealth. She made her mind. She would have the surgery, no matter the cost. And she did not care that the money did not fully exist in her hands. She borrowed. She sold. She promised repayment to those who trusted her, all with a smile that hid her recklessness. And so, one by one, the pillars of her simple life began to crumble beneath her ambition. The small plot of land her father had left her, the home that carried his memory, she sold it, believing that a few papers in a bank account could buy the world she desired. Her mother wept. Her neighbors whispered. Yet Amara only laughed, her eyes shining with the dangerous light of someone convinced that the future was hers to command. It was not cruelty that guided her heart, nor was it malice. It was hunger, a hunger for a life that had never been hers, a hunger for recognition, admiration, and the kind of love she believed could only be bought with beauty and wealth. She imagined the moment she would step into a grand hall, men bowing, whispers of awe following her every step. In her mind, nothing could touch her. She was invincible, untouchable, above the ordinary struggles of those around her. Yet even as she dreamed, even as she planned, the threads of destiny were already weaving themselves tightly around her. Every choice, every insult, every laughter at a humble man's attempt to win her heart was a step toward the night of rain and steel, toward the twist of metal and the roar of destruction that would change everything. And though she did not know it then, that path, paved with pride, vanity, and ambition, would lead her not to glory, but to a reckoning more severe than any she had imagined. Amara's heart was a fire that never settled. The more she looked at the world of wealth and glamour on her screens, the more she convinced herself that she was meant for it. Every advertisement, every video, Every image of a rich and beautiful woman laughing in a room full of sparkling lights seemed to whisper in her ear, "You too can have this. You were born to shine, to be admired, to be desired." And soon, those whispers became commands, echoing in her mind day and night. Her friends, the few who shared her vanity and encouraged it, became her counsel, her choir of praise. "Amara," they said, "you are not like the others. You have beauty, but beauty is a gift that must be shaped. Do not let men who cannot see it waste your time. You deserve more. You must demand more." And she did. She began to scrutinize every man who came near her, measuring them against an impossible standard. Traders with honest hands and honest hearts were too dull. Young men who labored in fields or offices were too ordinary. No man, she believed, could rise to her level unless he carried the shine of money, fame, or power. She began to watch her reflection endlessly, adjusting her posture, her expressions, practicing the smiles that might one day captivate a rich man's attention. She studied the women she saw online, mimicking their gestures, their clothes, their every move. Each glance in a mirror became a lesson in seduction, in performance, in preparation for the life she envisioned. Every rejection, every scorned suitor only fueled her obsession, turning her desire into a burning compulsion. But the obsession was not merely in her heart. It crept into her soul. She began to view every aspect of her being as a tool, every curve, every smile, every laugh something to be honed, enhanced, perfected. The small home she inherited, the modest property of her father, became nothing more than a stepping stone, a temporary weight to be discarded on her way to greatness. She spent hours imagining the parties, the grand halls, the attention of men whose wealth could buy empires. In those dreams, she was not Amara, the girl from a humble village. She was Amara, the woman everyone envied, everyone desired, everyone whispered about. Gossip spread, as it always does. Neighbors whispered about the girl who laughed at suitors, the girl who scorned good men for ordinary lives. "She's proud," they said. "She mocks those who have hearts. She dreams of men who live in glass houses and shine in lights." Beware, for pride comes before a fall. But Amara did not listen. Pride, she thought, was her ally, and ambition was her guide. The warnings were nothing but the echoes of those who could not rise, the voices of small minds. She would not be small. She would not be ordinary. Her obsession grew into action. She sought out the surgeons, the clinics, the people who promised perfection in exchange for money. Every conversation, every consultation, every whispered recommendation became a step closer to the dream she could no longer resist. She began to calculate costs, to tally the money she had, the money she could borrow, the value of her father's land. Nothing was too precious to sacrifice. If the world demanded payment for beauty and desire, she would pay it in full, and more. At night, she would lie awake in the small room of her father's house, staring at the ceiling, imagining herself in silk dresses, stepping into limousines, and seeing men's eyes follow her like moths to a flame. She imagined the envy of every girl who had once laughed at her, the admiration of men who had once ignored her. She was obsessed, not just with beauty, but with recognition, power, and the illusion that these things could fill the hollow spaces in her heart. And yet, obsession has a shadow. It does not stay in the mind alone. It reaches into the hands, into the deeds. She began borrowing secretly, promising repayment she could not guarantee, offering false hope to lenders who trusted her smile. The modest property her father had left her, once a place of memory and comfort, became merely a ledger item, a sum she could convert into the means to change her body. She justified it all, telling herself that she was investing in her destiny, that the world belonged to those who dared, and that only fools feared sacrifice. The village watched and whispered and shook their heads. They saw a girl who was beautiful, yes, but reckless, a girl who mocked the ordinary and coveted the unattainable. But Amara did not hear the whispers. She did not see the shaking heads. Her obsession had grown so strong that the world beyond her desire had ceased to exist. Only one truth remained. She must be perfect, she must be desired, she must be seen, and she would stop at nothing to achieve it. And so, like a river that cannot turn back from its own current, she moved toward her destiny, not knowing, not yet, that the currents would become a storm, that the river would crash against rocks too sharp and too cruel to survive. Her obsession had set the stage for the night of rain and steel, for the crash that would strip everything away. The dreams she chased, the curves she enhanced, the wealth she longed for, all of it would be tested in a single moment, and the lesson that awaited her would be as bitter as it was swift. The day came when dreams were no longer enough. Thinking was no longer enough. Looking in the mirror and imagining was no longer enough. Amara had decided that the world she craved would not wait for her to grow older, to save, or to stumble by chance into the arms of a rich and famous man. No, she would take her destiny into her own hands, with the courage of a river cutting through rock and the recklessness of a bird who forgets the storm. It began with numbers, as all dangerous plans do. She counted the money she had saved, the coins hidden in jars, the bills tucked under mattresses, and even the small treasure she had inherited from her father. It was not enough. The surgeon's fee, the clinic, the hospital stay, the recovery, it demanded more than her savings. And so, she turned her eyes to borrowing, approaching those who trusted her honesty, those who still believed in her smile and her gentle manners from years past. She promised repayment. She swore by her father's name. She offered collateral she did not fully possess, yet the loans were given, because people are foolishly generous to those they admire. Still, the sum was insufficient. The dreams of men with fame and gold, the life of admiration she imagined, required a sacrifice beyond money alone. And so her eyes fell upon the one thing that tethered her to the past, the one thing that carried the memory of her father's life and labor. The small property left to her, the house built with clay bricks, timber, and love. Her heart thumped as she made the decision. She would sell it. Her mother cried, clutching her hand, trembling, saying, "Amara, child, do not do this. That house is all we have left of your father. Do not throw it away for vanity." Her father's neighbors, elders she had known all her life, shook their heads, muttering under their breath. "Pride, pride, pride, the young ones will learn too late." But Amara's mind was made. She told herself that the house was but clay and timber. Her dream was flesh and life. What is a house compared to the power of being desired? What is memory compared to glory? The property was sold swiftly and quietly. The papers exchanged hands, the money pressed in her palms, and for a moment she felt victorious, as though she had conquered the world. She invested the sum into the surgery, into consultations, into every detail that promised the perfection she so desired. Each step brought her closer to what she believed would be a new life, a life in which men with wealth and fame would pursue her, where envy would follow her footsteps and admiration would light every room she entered. Yet in her victory, the shadows of consequence whispered faintly. She ignored the tightening in her chest, the unease that came from selling the only thing her father had left. She ignored the way her mother's eyes, heavy with sorrow, followed her as she packed her bags for the clinic. She ignored the subtle glances of neighbors who had once greeted her warmly, but now watched silently, knowing that ambition had grown into obsession. And so, Amara went under the surgeon's knife, the culmination of every sacrifice, every insult, every discarded warning. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and possibility. She lay on the table, heart pounding, imagining the life that awaited her on the other side of the pain, on the other side of the swelling, on the other side of the stitches. She whispered to herself that nothing could stop her now, that she had done all that was needed, that her beauty would soon command the life she had always dreamed of. The surgery was a success. She awoke to her reflection, to curves she had never possessed, to a body that seemed to hum with power and possibility. She cried tears of triumph, imagining the men who would see her now, imagining the jealousy, the desire, the attention that would follow. For Amara, that moment was the crown of all her choices, proof that ambition and sacrifice could bend the world to her will. Yet even as she marveled at herself, the first cracks of fate had already formed, silent and unseen. The road home, the rain, the night. These were the unseen judges, waiting to teach the lesson she had ignored. The money borrowed, the land sold, the pride she carried. All of it would soon collide with the truth that no matter how carefully one builds, life has the power to destroy with a single, invisible hand. For in chasing a dream built on appearance and desire, Amara had set herself on a path from which there would be no return. The fatal decision was made, the die cast, and all that remained was the journey home, a journey that would change her forever in ways no mirror, no admiration, no wealth could ever restore. Yet, even in that moment of triumph, the shadows of reality lingered, silent and patient. Pain hummed in her abdomen, in her hips, in every stitch that held her new body together. Every movement was a reminder that perfection demands suffering, that beauty has a cost far beyond gold or coins. But she ignored it, for her eyes were on the horizon of fame and wealth, on the imagined lives of men who would fall at her feet, on the dreams that had consumed her for years. For a few days, she moved carefully, allowing her body to heal, her mind weaving fantasies of admiration and desire. She imagined stepping into cars, into parties, into the arms of men whose names were whispered with reverence. Every glance in the mirror, every careful adjustment of clothing, every thought of her new curves reinforced the obsession that had driven her here. She was not merely recovering. She was transforming, not only physically but in her mind, building the story of the woman she believed she was destined to become. And so, when the day came to leave the hospital, when the nurses helped her into the car, she felt as though the world itself awaited her debut. The rain had returned, drumming against the roof of the car, but she barely noticed it. Her mind was elsewhere, imagining lights, cameras, and the admiration of men who would soon see her and desire her without question. She held her head high, smiled faintly, and whispered, soon, everything will be mine." But little did she know that the road ahead, slick and treacherous, had already begun to write a different story, one that would turn triumph into tragedy, dreams into ruin, and the obsession that had driven her into pain she could never have imagined. For beauty, my children, is a fragile thing, and desire, a dangerous one. And on that night, beneath the pouring rain and over the winding asphalt, fate waited patiently to teach its harshest lesson. The night was heavy with rain, and the road ahead glistened like a serpent winding through the darkness, its scales reflecting the pale light of passing street lamps. Amara sat in the back of the car, her heart still fluttered with triumph, imagining the life that awaited her, the rich men who would gaze at her, the admiration that would follow her every step, the envy that would burn in the eyes of those who had doubted her. The car moved cautiously, tires humming against the slick asphalt. Rain pelted the roof like tiny drums, a rhythm both calming and ominous. She leaned back, closing her eyes briefly, imagining the door she would open, the lights that would follow her, the attention she had worked so hard to command. Her body, newly sculpted, felt alive beneath her fingers, and she ran her hand lightly over the curve that had cost her every coin she owned. And then it happened. A patch of water, deeper than anyone could see in the dark, caught the car. The tires lost their grip, the vehicle shuddered violently, and Amara felt herself lifted as if by invisible hands. One moment she was sitting upright, dreaming of a life of wealth. The next she was airborne, tossed from one end of the car to the other, a ragdoll flung by forces beyond comprehension. Metal groaned, glass shattered, and the sharp, acrid scent of burning rubber filled her nostrils. Rainwater mixed with blood, slicking the seats and her trembling fingers. She slammed against the door, then the seat, then the roof in a flurry of motion so fast and violent she could not track it. Her head cracked against the window. Pain exploded in waves across her chest and hips, sharper than any she had imagined during recovery. And yet, even as her body was torn and battered, her mind sought one thing: the proof of her ambition, the body she had sacrificed everything for. Trembling, she reached backward, her hand brushing against her surgically enhanced curves. The warmth beneath her fingers was alien. "My BBL, my future," she whispered, though no sound came out beyond a ragged gasp. Reality twisted, blurred, and then she found herself no longer inside the car but lying on the hard, wet ground, the world spinning violently around her. Darkness pressed at the edges of her vision, threatening to claim her entirely. Around her, the world was chaos. Voices shouted, some close, some distant. Tires screeched again somewhere in the darkness. Lights, blinding and frantic, pierced through the rain. Yet all of it was muted to her ears, overwhelmed by the roar of pain and panic in her own chest. She could barely see, barely breathe, but she reached again, her fingers brushing the ruined curves of what had once been the crown of her pride. And then, slowly, consciousness began to ebb. Her body was lifted, carried by unseen hands, back into the sterile world of hospitals and white walls. She felt the cold, the antiseptic, the bustle of people whose faces were half blurred by her pain. Yet even as the darkness claimed her fully, one thought remained, jagged and bitter. Everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, everything she had believed in, was slipping away, destroyed in a single, uncontrollable moment. When Amara opened her eyes again, the world was not as she had imagined. The bright lights, the admiration, the envy of others, none of it remained. Instead, there was only white walls, the smell of antiseptic, and a sharp, unyielding pain that traveled through every inch of her body. She tried to lift her arms, to sit up, but the agony was unbearable. Her legs felt like lead, her back screamed with every slight movement, and her face, once proud and confident, now throbbed with injuries she could not ignore. A nurse hovered over her, hands gentle, voice soft, but the words seemed distant, almost unreal. "Amara, you've been in a severe accident. The damage is extensive. You need to rest." Rest, she thought bitterly, as if the world could offer her any comfort now. She tried to focus on her body, the curve she had fought for, the BBL she had sacrificed everything to obtain. Her fingers trembled as they brushed against her sides, and the warmth she once took as triumph now felt foreign and cruel. The implants, the enhancements she had spent so much to perfect, had been destroyed. Some had burst, some mangled beyond repair. The very thing she had believed would secure her admiration and power was gone, irreparably. And worse, the accident had not spared her face. Bruises and swelling obscured the features she had once polished and presented to the world. For the first time, she looked in a mirror and did not recognize the person staring back. The confident, proud woman she had imagined herself to be was gone, replaced by a fragile figure, half paralyzed and terrified. Her words faltered when she tried to speak, and tears of frustration and fear ran down her cheeks. She had dreamed of grandeur, of admiration, of desire. Yet now she faced a harsh truth. The world she had sacrificed everything for would never be hers. Doctors moved around her constantly, adjusting equipment, checking her vitals, noting the paralysis, the fractures, the permanent injuries. Every new piece of information was another blow. She could no longer work. She could no longer move with the freedom she had once taken for granted, and the face that had once commanded attention now carried marks she could never erase. Pride, ambition, and obsession had led her here, and the lesson was bitter indeed. Her family visited, their faces a mixture of sorrow, fear, and helplessness. Her mother wept silently, clutching her hand, while neighbors whispered outside the hospital windows. The property she had sold, the money she had borrowed, the sacrifices she had made, all of it now seemed hollow. Not one of the men she had dreamed of would now see her as she had imagined. The body, the beauty, The power she had pursued was destroyed, leaving her in a world of pain, humiliation, and despair. Amara's mind, once filled with dreams and schemes, now churned with regret. She thought of the suitors she had scorned, the warnings she had ignored, the family she had hurt in pursuit of a fantasy. Every insult, every careless decision, every borrowed naira weighed on her like stones pressing against her chest. Pride had led her to obsession. Obsession had led her to sacrifice, and sacrifice had led her straight into the hands of fate. In the quiet of the hospital room, as the rain continued to patter against the windows, Amara understood the gravity of her choices. She had chased an illusion, sold her inheritance, risked her body, and ignored the good in her life, only to have it all stripped away in a single night of misfortune. The wealthy men, the fame, the admiration, none of it could be reclaimed. She had traded her father's memory, her safety, and her peace for a dream that had evaporated before her eyes. After the accident, after the surgeries and the endless days of pain, Amara discovered another cruelty that life had reserved for her. It was not only her body that had been broken, not only her dreams that had been shattered, but the people she had once counted on had begun to drift away. Friends who had cheered her obsession and encouraged her ambitions now whispered behind closed doors, their loyalty fleeting, their admiration superficial. The men she had once scorned for not being rich or famous. They were gone, distant and untouched by her suffering. Even those who had offered her loans, who had trusted her promises and believed in her smile, grew silent. Calls went unanswered, messages ignored. When she tried to reach out, the world seemed indifferent, as if her ambition had rendered her invisible when she was no longer a prize. She realized with bitter clarity that all the support she had depended on had been conditional, contingent on her being what she had promised to be, perfect, desirable, untouchable. Now she was none of those things, and the world turned its back. Her mother remained, yes, but even she could only watch with trembling hands and tearful eyes. There was little she could do to ease the pain, to undo the paralysis, to restore the beauty that had been so fleeting. The neighbors, once curious and judgmental, now treated her with pity, their words softer, their eyes wary. Where once Amara had walked with pride, she now moved, slowly, painfully, reluctantly, under the weight of shame and misfortune. She spent hours staring at the ceiling, thinking of the men she had mocked, the warnings she had ignored, the house she had sold, the coin she had borrowed. All of it seemed meaningless now. Pride and obsession had given her nothing but pain, injury, and isolation. No hand reached out to steady her. No voice whispered encouragement. No gaze lingered with admiration. She was abandoned, my children, abandoned not only by fortune, but by the illusions she had built around herself. Thus she remained, surrounded by sterile walls and a quiet world, her body broken, her beauty lost, her ambitions scattered like leaves in the wind. The echoes of laughter, the imagined glances of rich and famous men, the envy she had sought, all were gone. In their place remained silence, stillness, and the bitter companionship of regret. And so, Amara, once so full of dreams and fire, learned the weight of abandonment, a weight heavier than any she had ever imagined.